So why, okay, Rachel's asking, why would somebody get super angry when taking methyl B? And then fatigue. So if you're asking, so some people when they're taking methylated B vitamins, this is very common. What is methylating? What is methylation? So methylation is this chemical process by which your body helps you detoxify things. And so one of the most important methylated B vitamins is folate. Folate is a primary driver of methylation. Methylation is just it's a manner of detoxification. It's also a manner of neurotransmitter production, so it's one of the ways that you can make serotonin. You need folate to do that, to make serotonin properly. But methylation, so what I mentioned mycotoxins earlier. One of the things that I see in B vitamin intolerance is mycotoxin poisoning. One of the reasons why is that mycotoxins, when you ramp up or increase methylation, one of the things, if you've got mycotoxins in you, you will increase mycotoxin output. So you will increase mycotoxin detoxification in a sense. Most of it come out your urine or sweat. But if you're still in an environment where there's mold, in other words, if you're in a moldy environment and you start to try to detox from mycotoxins, but every time you're getting rid of some, but more of them just keep coming in you and they're coming from your environment, then you'll actually create symptoms of detoxification. And one of those can be mood swings, irritability, among other things. So a lot of times when people don't tolerate methylated B vitamins, we find them in a moldy environment where they're being exposed to mycotoxins. It doesn't always have to be mold or mycotoxins. There could be other environmental pollutants or other toxins that a person's struggling to and dealing with, like mercury or lead or cadmium, some of the heavy metals. But it's oftentimes, in my experience, mycotoxins is a major player. Let's see here. Why would someone taking, let's see, I think I answered that one. What does it mean if anti-gliadin antibodies are super high? It means you're gluten sensitive and you're being exposed to gluten. That's basically what it means. Even if your deaminated gliadins are negative, those tests are confusing, and that's one of the reasons you probably heard me talk a lot, if you've watched the show for any length of time, about the problem with blood testing to try to identify gluten sensitivity. Their blood tests are poor markers for a number of reasons we can't get into today, but genetic testing, if you think you might be gluten sensitive, or if you're not sure, and your doctors run the celiac tests, the blood tests, the antibody tests, and they're negative or positive or a mixture of the results, you just understand that blood tests are inaccurate. You really want genetic testing if you want to get an answer to that question, to that burning question about whether or not you should be changing your diet. We'll put a link up for genetic testing in the feed for you if you want to learn more about genetic testing. Let's see here. Can B12 deficiency cause skin rash on the mouth and sinus? I don't know if that question just got cut off or what. Hello, can vitamin B12 deficiency cause skin rash on the mouth and a rash on the sinus? I don't know that there's a rash on the sinus, but maybe you mean sinus congestion or inflammation. So B12 deficiency generally is not notorious for causing skin rashes. That generally is like B2, B1 can cause skin rashes. B3 deficiency can cause skin rashes. Not typically B12. That's not to say that it can't, but it's not a common symptom. Typically B12, the most common symptom of B12 deficiencies, fatigue, even if you have plenty of sleep. And that's one of the reasons why one of the hallmark symptoms of B12 deficiency is something called macrocytic anemia. That's where your red blood cells fail to mature properly and they don't carry oxygen very well. So no matter how much you're sleeping, you're tired all the time. That's a hallmark of B12 deficiency, a hallmark symptom. Let's see here. If I'm FODMAP histamine sensitive, can Ultra Biotic Defense cause reverse reaction and cause me to get bacterial overgrowth? No, it won't cause you a bacterial overgrowth, but some people don't do well if they're histamine intolerant. They don't do well with bifidobacter and lactobacillus at high quantities because those bacteria are a potential source of histamine. So you'd be better suited for one, if you're looking for a probiotic to support your gut health, you'd be better suited for the probiotic I have. It's called Biotic Force, would probably be a better fit for you because it won't affect you when you're histamine intolerant. I have excessive amounts of gas that sometimes is difficult to breathe, and after burping a lot I get a relief. What product and food should I take and eat? That's a huge question. I mean, if you get gas no matter what you eat every time you eat, you could just have an overall general digestion problem where you're not digesting your food well. So I mean, I would say start with a good digestive enzyme, something like Ultra Digest or Gluten Shield, which is a digestive enzyme. But I would also pay attention to what it is that you're eating, because it may not be all foods that are creating that. It may just be certain foods. And so I think if you look at a lot of the gas-forming foods, your cruciferous vegetables are gas-forming foods. A lot of your legumes, beans, are gas-forming foods. But it can be different for different people. So you really want to pay attention to what you eat and how you feel with certain foods versus others. Let's see here. What happens to me if I need blood? This is a little off topic, but if I need blood, okay, that's a real question, right? And the donor has had the COVID vaccine. I do not get vaccines of any sort, as I am well educated about them. So, you know, that's a conundrum we're all going to be facing in the next few years if you're not a fan of the V. You know, one of the things I would suggest you do is basically bank your own blood for yourself. And that can be done. You can donate blood and have it banked, and that way if you ever need it, you can get access to it if you're worried about you know, getting blood from somebody who has that V. Is vaccine-induced fatigue reversible? It depends on why the vaccine induced the fatigue. So, you know, if you're talking about, you know, your standard childhood vaccines or your flu shot vaccines, those types of things, a lot of the fatigue induced by those can come from the toxic adjuvants that are in the shots themselves. And so depending on whether or not your body's more susceptible to reacting to those, I see some people have to chelate, for example, the mercury or the aluminum out of their bodies to overcome the fatigue that a vaccine can induce. As far as the disease that shall not be named, that vaccine, I think that, you know, I know a lot of you have talked about being forced or pressured by your work or whatnot to get it. You know, I can't tell you what to do in that sense. I can just tell you that this whole thing is illegal and it's highly suspect. And if you haven't hired an attorney and you haven't gotten with other people to have a class action lawsuit against your employer or whoever it is that's trying to force that because you don't want it, that's what you need to do. You don't need to give in. This is not the area in your life where you roll over and lay down like a dog and give in. This is the area where you stand strong. This is the line in the sand. You ever wondering when the Germans look back at the history? I know a lot of you saying, what are you talking about, World War II and Germans? And you have to understand that the Jewish people originally were ostracized in Germany because of infectious disease outbreak that was blamed on Jewish people. And then so they started calling them filthy, dirty animals, and they started making them wear yellow stars. This is what we're seeing with these cards that they're doing in Europe now, these vaccine cards. It's an equivalent to that. When are you going to stand up? When should the Germans have stood up and not allowed their fellow citizens to become second-class citizens and then become damned by a leadership out of ignorance and out of hatred? This is the time to stand up for yourself. Don't lie down. Now, there's no other time in history that any of us have ever lived through like this time, and now's the time to stand strong. My grandma has only one kidney left. Does high blood pressure medicine worsen an already compromised kidney function? Well, you can function well with only one kidney. And so if she's only got one kidney left, it's possible that one kidney that she has is enlarged and taken on the function of two kidneys. It's a very common thing that we see. That's why a person can donate a kidney to another person and not have to worry about major problems. That being said, it's always a good idea that you encourage that family member to talk with their doctor about, you know, which medicine they're on and whether or not it impacts or affects the kidney. Does ingesting sodium bicarbonate help with fatigue? No, not really. Sodium bicarbonate as a supplement is overrated. I mean, it's a supplement that a lot of people take, or a product that a lot of people take to neutralize acid, because everybody's worried about acid. Acid's normal and natural. You don't want to drink sodium bicarbonate. It'll neutralize your stomach acid. unless you have an abundance of acid, which is a very, very rare thing. Most people don't have an abundance of acid. They have an abundance of lack of acid, right? The opposite problem. And so taking sodium bicarb is only going to destroy your ability to digest and absorb the nutrients from your food. It's not going to improve your fatigue. What's my opinion on chewing khat to increase energy levels? So you're talking about the herb, the plant that basically is used as a stimulant. That particular, it's a drug, right? Cathinone is a drug. The ingredient which is in khat is called cathinone, and that is basically it's a sympathomimetic drug. So it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. The drug is highly addictive. It can cause constipation. It can shut down your GI tract. It can disrupt your sleep. If you did it every blue moon, I wouldn't hold it against you, but if you're using it on a daily basis to drive your energy production, I think you're going to end up addicted, and it's probably worse than caffeine. It's chemically speaking, it's closer to amphetamine than anything else. So, I mean, would you take an amphetamine drugs every day to get your energy? The answer hopefully will be no. Filene's asking about steps to heal fatigued adrenals. The number one thing you can do to help your adrenals recover is to figure out what caused them to crash in the first place. And so the first step is lots of rest, and then that includes naps. So a lot of people, especially if you grew up in America, you feel guilty about taking a nap, like you're not being productive during that nap. But with major adrenal fatigue, naps become an important, critical piece of recovering your energy. So nap, if your body tells you to sleep, go to sleep. Nap as often as you can, but you've got to figure out what was causing the adrenal fatigue in the first place, because there's not any degree of supplements, and there's no level of supplements that you're going to take that'll fix that problem unless you fix why the problem started. Now, there are certainly supplements you can take to support it, and vitamin C is one of the biggest. 4 to 5 grams of vitamin C a day. Vitamin B5 is another very important one. 500 to 1,000 milligrams of vitamin B5 can be an important element to help adrenal glands recover. And then you might also want to consider a good adrenal glandular supplement that is basically, it's the organ meat of the adrenal gland in a capsule form that just gives the nutrients that the adrenal gland needs to function and do its job appropriately. So we can put links to those things up if you're interested. Vitamin C, vitamin B5, and I have something called Ultra Adrenal Support that you might find helpful or useful. Marcus says, have a corn allergy. Would the Air Doctor air purifier work to decrease corn fumes as well as mold in my house? They have a so it will. So understand that. Well, it's not going to do much to corn, unless you live next door to a cornfield and that's where you're pulling. But if it's mold in your house that you're worried about, an air purifier will not solve a mold toxicity issue. It will pull mold and mycotoxins out of your air, but it won't solve the core of the issue. Generally, if a home has a mold issue, that issue has to be diagnosed, and it has to be ascertained, and it has to be remediated. And no amount of air filter is going to fix that problem. Using an air filter to pull mold out of the air is a lot like taking aspirin to fix a headache. If you don't know why you're getting headaches, the aspirin's only going to give you a temporary relief, and you're going to become dependent on the need for that. And even in the long run, it's going to damage you in other ways. And so an air filter is a good thing to have. Don't get me wrong. I highly encourage. I have 3 air doctors at home. In the different bedrooms in my house. And so that being said, it's not a bad thing to own, but if you think you have a mold problem, my point is hire somebody to come out and investigate that in a much greater degree of detail. Can potassium deficiency cause fatigue? Absolutely, it can, and that's an easy test. You can have potassium levels measured as well. You can also add, very simply, you can add electrolytes back to your water. If you're using a reverse osmosis water filter or drinking RO water, you need to add electrolytes back to it anyway, because that RO water can deplete your body of mineral, potassium being one of them. Karen's asking about, can I explain gluten neuropathy? I can explain it very simply. I can explain it in much more depth, and I have some videos that go more in depth on that. But just the 10,000-foot overview is gluten is a nerve toxin. And so people with gluten sensitivity, when they get exposure to gluten, they form an antibody complex to gluten that impacts the nerve itself, and it can create damage to the nerve and the myelin that surrounds the nerve, leading to the symptoms of neuropathy, numbness, tingling, neurological pain in the extremities. All those are possibilities. Okay, let's see here. So I can check off 11 of the common causes. How much would these overlap with Hashimoto's symptoms? They'd overlap quite a bit, because remember, fatigue, Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune low thyroid, manifests for many in the form of fatigue, right? That's the manifestation. And so there is a lot of overlap with adrenal and, well, with Hashimoto's or thyroid insufficiency, if you will, that autoimmune process. How do you know if you're taking too many B vitamins? You know, it's very hard to overdose on B vitamins. Probably the one that you have to be the most cautious around is vitamin B6. Vitamin B6 taken in too high doses can cause some neurological symptoms in some people. It's a pretty rare side effect, but you know, the other way you know is you get monitored, right? You have your levels monitored as you're taking them to make sure that you're not doing too much. Lynn's asking about mycotoxins and mercury. Can they keep me from sleeping? Yes, to both. I'm getting my amalgams taken out at the dentist and waiting for doing detox for mold and mercury. So tired all the time. I'm gluten-free. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a tough situation to be in. You got all those different moving parts that have to be dealt with. But yes, mycotoxins and mercury can both cause a lot of sleep disruption. Can too much exercise cause fatigue? Yeah. I exercised a little bit too much this morning. We did a pretty aggressive workout today, so I'm more tired tonight than what I typically might be. But where exercise really sets in for fatigue is when you overdo it all the time, and you can develop overtraining syndrome, and that can really impact you. So, okay, Robbie's asking about hepatitis C. She had it 18 years ago, did a 12-month treatment of robavirin and interferon. What supplements would you suggest? Look, you got to use milk thistle, and particularly it needs to be standardized to silymarin. I have a product called Ultra Liver Detox is really what I would suggest. It has both milk thistle as silymarin, concentrated silymarin, but it also has NAC, and it has several other things that the liver needs for good support. So that's really what I would suggest if you've got that history of hepatitis. I'd also recommend, if you're not already following it, I'd recommend a grain-free diet. We see a lot of people with gluten and grains, and that can lead to, for many, autoimmune hepatitis as well as fatty liver disease. Would an injury like a broken bone be considered a physical stress? Absolutely, definitely. A broken bone is a huge physical stress because the healing of that broken bone requires a vast amount of resources nutritionally that your body has to come up with. If you're not taking extra minerals right now, you probably would be a good idea taking extra minerals, taking extra vitamin D and vitamin A and vitamin K. They all help with bone formation and bone healing and repair. B vitamins help with bone healing and repair. So good idea to be on a good nutrient cocktail to support that bone recovery. If I didn't experience muscle soreness after a workout, does that mean my muscles didn't grow from that workout? That's a great question, and I think the answer is ask yourself this question. Did you sandbag that workout, right? When you worked out, was it easy? Was it not challenging for you? Did you not breathe hard? And if the answer to those questions are, it really wasn't a workout, it was more just kind of I was going through the motions, and you didn't get sore, it's because you didn't work out effectively enough. But some people don't always get immediate delay, or I should say not immediate, but delayed, what's called DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness after a workout. And there are several reasons why. One, it could be that you didn't work out hard enough. And two, it could be that you worked out plenty hard, but that your workouts are too similar all the time. So like if you only do like 6 or 7 different movements when you go to the gym, and that's all you really ever do, you're going to stop getting sore after a short period of time. Your body's just not going to keep getting sore because you're not challenging those muscles differently. The sign of a good workout is diversity within the workout, within the maneuvers and the movements that you're doing. High intensity interval training is one of the best ways that humans can work out because it provides a high level of intensity with a variable routine that changes on a frequent enough basis that your body never has time to adapt to the exercises that you're throwing at it, and that's going to tend to make you sore more consistently and more predictably, which is going to lead to stronger lean mass growth. Let's see, what causes eyelid twitching? A lot of times eyelid twitching is mineral deficiency. Mineral deficiency, particularly magnesium, can cause that. Does L-lysine prevent serotonin overload? No. No, not typically, no. It doesn't prevent serotonin overload, but the question is, why would you suspect that you have serotonin overload in the first place? When an injury, let's see, I answered that one. After exercise, I get migraines. Any clues? Yeah, your gym might have mold in it. The cleaners being used in the gym, you might be reactive to. I get this a lot. You know, the gym. I've been in gyms before where you know, one of the employees will come up on the machine next to me and they'll start squirting the cleaner, especially in this you know, post-COVID world. Everybody thinks they got to spray 25 chemicals to protect themselves, when in effect those 25 chemicals are destroying your immune system. But a lot of times in a mainstream gym, they use a lot of these chemicals on the equipment. A lot of people will react to them. So if that's the case, if you can try working out at home, and if you don't get the headache, you might have an answer. If you get the headache when you're at home, it could be that you're anemic, and that when you're working out, your oxygen levels are falling low enough that it's triggering that headache in the middle of your workout. My 3 kids give me fatigue. Yeah, that's because that's just called parenting. That's a variable. God will give you peace one day, you know, when they're older, but that's a variable, especially at 6, 5, and 1 years of age. That's you know, that's one you're going to have to dig in and do everything else really, really well to get through those times. My youngest now is 19, so but I went through that, so I know what you're going through. How soon will you offer intracellular nutritional testing? Carolyn, we're working on some of the final details of it. I'm not promising this, but I'm hoping January of 2022. That's our goal. How about sunlight exposure to fight fatigue? I answered that one, I think. Can caffeine have negative effects contributing to fatigue over time? It absolutely can. As a stimulant, it can overstimulate the adrenal glands, and so if your adrenal glands are at all tapped, caffeine is one of the worst things you can do. All right, Gina says it's very difficult to read your notes in black on a dartboard. Okay, note taken, Gina. We'll write in white for you next time. My doctor measures iron binding capacity, percent saturation, and ferritin. That's good. At least they're measuring that. Can fluoride cause hypothyroidism? Yes, it can. Fluoride interferes with iodine uptake into your thyroid gland and can definitely affect how your body produces thyroid hormone. I would love to take CoQ10, but it's so expensive. That's the mark of good CoQ10 is the cost. Because if you find CoQ10 and it's inexpensive, it probably means that it's not CoQ10. Actual true CoQ10 is very expensive and hard to formulate. Can an overproduction of histamine in the body cause fatigue? Yes, it can, for different reasons. So histamine is a stimulant. So a lot of people with an overproduction of histamine actually have anxiety, and the anxiety will drive adrenal output. It will drive adrenaline output. It will drive noradrenaline output, which can lead to a stimulant-induced fatigue over time. So yeah, histamine can definitely lead to that. What causes air hunger? For most, air hunger is caused by anemias. Anemia is one of the most common causes. I mean, there are others, but anemia is definitely one of the big ones. Would having elevated white blood cells cause fatigue? Having elevated white blood cells means you have an infection. And so if you generally speaking, now again, there are other reasons why that could be the case, but white blood cell elevation is a common cause, or a common symptom rather, of a chronic infection. And if you have a chronic infection, that means your body is fighting against something. So a lot of your resources and energy are going to that battle, and so it can absolutely make you fatigued. Let's see, let's keep going. So Jane's asking about the new classes of over-the-counter allergy medicine. So some of them are not antihistamines, and so they don't cause fatigue. Some of them are leukotriene antagonists. There's a different mechanism of action, and those don't tend to cause the fatigue as much, but they still suppress your immune system. And in my opinion, they're still a bad idea if you find yourself having to use them on a regular basis. Can't you just eat what you want and take vitamins and supplements to get the needed nutrients? Please say yes. I'm not going to. Yeah, go have a donut and just take your vitamin. No, it doesn't work that way. You got to understand, you got to eat real food. That's number one. Beyond eating real food, sometimes you need more. And so sometimes supplementing with nutrients becomes a necessity, especially if you're trying to dig yourself out of a hole of years of eating bad food. And that's where nutrition can be very helpful supplementally. Now, as a general rule of thumb, if you're already healthy and feeling good, a good thing, kind of a good rule of thumb, there are four supplements that I recommend that people take on a daily basis if they feel good and they want to just stay as healthy as they can. One's a good quality multivitamin. Another one is a good quality probiotic. Another is a good quality omega-3 supplement. Unless you just eat a lot of cold water fish, it's really hard to get the quantities of omega-3 from a modern diet today. And then the fourth would be a digestive enzyme to help just support good solid digestion of the food that you are eating to get better gas mileage out of the nutrition that you're eating. Why do people get deficient in vitamin D? Rachel's asking. Number one reason is chronic underlying inflammation. Chronic underlying inflammation depletes vitamin D very quickly. Chronic high levels of blood sugar also deplete vitamin D very quickly. So if you have a chronic high carbohydrate diet that is driving up your blood sugar, you're going to burn through vitamin D. And then if that diet is also poor causing inflammation, it's going to burn through vitamin D. Those are big reasons why. Another one is that you don't eat foods that are rich in vitamin D. One of the few foods rich in vitamin D is liver. Most of you won't eat it. And you're not getting enough sunshine. Those are all reasons why. What do I recommend for detoxing? Well, it's not one thing. We're going to talk more about detox in January, Kim, so make sure you tune in for that show. But we're going to do a detox crash course. I'll just simply say this. The number one rule of any detox is to not retox. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, your money, and your energy and effort, and potentially harming yourself in the process. So, but we're going to do a deep dive on that in January. I'm on all kinds of drugs for depression, anxiety, etc. Have been 30 years. I have chronic pain and chronic constipation. Taking Trulance, have acid reflux. I think I have numbness and tingling. I'm 60. Yeah, Sylvia, you need to get on the no grain, no pain diet ASAP and track how you feel. I'd be surprised if you didn't come back in a couple weeks and report feeling better. Are cat naps in the afternoon? Some fatigue. Let's see. I don't know. Are cat naps in the afternoon okay? I think that's the question. Cat naps are fine. Yeah, where people get into trouble with cat naps is they go too long. Like a cat nap's 10 to 20 minutes. If you go further than that, you can end up waking up very groggy and very, very tired. So the trick to a cat nap is to just make sure that you keep it reasonable. Let's see here. Does sugar cause cancer? Of course it does. There is a huge correlation between sugar and cancer. So wherever you read that, it was probably propaganda. You have to understand a lot of the magazines, a lot of the newspapers, a lot of the news articles. I've been interviewed by major outlets in media, and every time I'm always cautious when New York Post calls, or when news health calls or world news calls, and they want me to do an interview with them. I'm always super cautious about going into interviews with major media, and one of the reasons why is they're notorious for soundbiting what you say and misconstruing it. And sometimes they do that on purpose. Like we had that happen. There was an article I did for New York Post. It was a number of years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, when I wrote No Grain, No Pain, and the book was coming out and they wanted to interview me. And they took little sound bites of the interview and wrote misconstruences on what I actually said and what I actually meant. In essence, they paraphrased me out of context, and they do that a lot on purpose. I can tell you that. They even do that in research studies. I was involved in, this was almost 15 years ago, I was involved at University of Texas medical branch in Galveston near me. They invited me out because they wanted me to participate in a cardiovascular study, and because they wanted me to donate my CoQ10. It's very high quality, but the doctors that were in charge of this study, they wrote the study on purpose to fail. They actually designed a CoQ10 study to purposefully create an outcome that looked like CoQ10 didn't work. And I read their study parameters, and so I called them out on it in the meeting. I said, why did you design this study to fail and make it look like CoQ10 doesn't work? And both of these doctors, their face turned beet red. They were shamed. I shamed them because I had caught them red-handed, hand in the cookie jar, so to speak. And so obviously I didn't move forward with that group of doctors, and I didn't help to fund this study that was designed to make CoQ10 look ineffective. And they do this a lot in research. They create a study parameter where they know the dose isn't going to be meaningful, and so there won't be an outcome that's positive for that nutrient. And this is just a common thing. And then major articles or major news stations or major media outlets will pick that study up and say, new study on CoQ10 shows it doesn't do anything, or new study on vitamin E shows it doesn't do anything. You guys you really don't have any idea how corrupt the industry is and how much there is a nefarious force behind a lot of the hands that move the news, purposefully designed to keep you ignorant and unempowered, and so that you don't have the ability to make meaningful changes in your life. It's very sad that we live in that world, but you have to understand those things exist. Evil exists, and people who are nefarious exist. I think many people are naive to that because they've never seen true evil in their life, but that's unfortunate, but it's also fortunate in a different way. But I would just simply say you've got to be careful about what you read in a lot of the mainstream media. It's kind of like the last 18 months have played out. Almost everything you've heard about the disease that shall not be named is a total farce. A lot of it is a total lie. That doesn't mean there aren't truths to it, but that's the mastery of telling a lie, is when there are enough truths to the lie that it can be believed, and the lie can be repeated repetitively over and over and over again. Eventually it becomes the truth, and then you get mass hypnosis and mass psychosis, and people are screaming at the top of their lungs in an irrational way because they fear that their lives are in jeopardy. They feel the mortality inkling in on their life because they have a very real fear that their life is in jeopardy, even though it's not really. It's their perception, and when they have the wrong perception around them, people make decisions based out of fear, based out of anger, and they make wrong moves. So it's just an unfortunate psychology that we're living through. Is there anything a person can do to get taste and smell back after COVID? Yeah, I mean, the two best things that you can do, three things: zinc, high dose quercetin, and then subsequently use essential oils. One of my favorite to use post-COVID is peppermint, and spend a couple of minutes deep breathing essential oil in to kind of reactivate the olfactory nerve. Let's see here. Can mycotoxins, let's see, excuse me, I answered that. Food grade hydrogen for nebulizing. You can, I mean, but what's the, it's not something that a person necessarily needs to do every day. If you're talking about as a mechanism to help overcome an upper respiratory problem, there's some really good clinical and anecdotal evidence that it does a really good job for things. But as far as doing it every day preventatively, it's not something I would say you need to do. Is there a way to help hypothyroidism without armor? Is there a vegetarian substitute or food I can eat more of? So we'll answer the part one to that question. You need to go watch my series on thyroid. I did a very, it's about an hour and a half long, on thyroid function and what you can do naturally to help your thyroid function more properly. And so go check that out, Judy. If you don't know where to find it, you just go over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/glutenology, and go through my archives and just type in a search box on my channel, type in thyroid, and you should be able to find that. Thoughts on depression and medications? Do we need them? Generally speaking, my opinion is no, if you find out why you're depressed. A lot of people are depressed for a lot of different biochemical reasons, but gluten is a very common cause of depression. We'll see gluten-induced depression in a lot of folks because that's one of the ways gluten manifests as a neurotoxin. It affects the brain, and it affects the microbiome, leading to depression. So I mean, there are times where it may be necessary, where medicine may prevent somebody from having suicidal tendency or thought, and that, I think, that's a decision you need to make between you and your doctor. But as a general rule of thumb, depression is underlying. What is depression? Depression is a form of inflammation. It's just a form of brain inflammation, but most doctors in psychiatry are subjective. They don't run tests. They don't do analytics. They say you have a brain imbalance, but they don't measure for what your brain imbalance is, and then they put you on very powerful chemicals and drugs, guessing what the imbalance is, and kind of taking shots in the dark at it. And I think that's irresponsible. Again, that's just my opinion, but should autoimmune patients do high-intensity workouts? Yes, to your tolerance. Can you have my brain? No. It's mine. It's the gift I've been given. and hopefully I plan on keeping it a very long time. But you're always welcome to pick it. Let's see here. We got more questions than we got time because we're already out of time. Look, I'm going to wrap it up tonight. We'll be back again next week for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. If you're new to the show, come back and visit us, understand what our mission here is. We're out here, we're trying to save 100 million lives. That's my goal in this world, in my life, is to save 100 million lives. So if you find my information helpful, if you find Picking My Brain effective and helpful at resolving many of your issues, please share the knowledge. Don't be stingy. Pass it on to someone that you love. Share it. Together we can help reach more people in this world, and we can bring better hope and light to this Alice in Wonderlandian time that we're living in. Also, make sure you subscribe. Come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org and make sure you subscribe there. Again, we're getting ready to change formats here. It's going to happen very, very soon. We're actually very close to our solution. And we're not leaving YouTube. We're not going to be on YouTube anymore. But we're just moving our platform because, frankly, I've not been. Let's just say I've not been 100% forthright with you all in the way that I would like to speak. I would like to be able to speak very openly and honestly, and I've been somewhat reserved about my language, simply because of censorship. We've had our fair share of it this year and our fair share of shadow banning and everything else, and so. That's one of the reasons we're moving our platform, so that I can speak freely and not fear the censorship that might come should I speak freely and in a more, let's just say in a more Lansing tongue. So come visit me. Make sure you subscribe. If you don't want my information to be censored from your inbox, come get on my newsletter where we control the message through email. So hope you all have a fantastic week. We'll see you next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Take care. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.